Hi, I'm Antonio Mora. In our alternate universes segments, we usually look at the differences between conservative and liberal media. But today I'm going to talk about that in combination with a problem that's just as important: made-up news. First, a new study shows Americans think made-up news is a much bigger problem than racism. That's somewhat understandable because a majority of Americans are white and don't have to deal with racism. Americans also think made-up news is a much bigger problem than terrorism. Again, somewhat understandable because most of us have short memories, don't live in big cities that are seen as facing a greater threat, and don't travel abroad to places victimized by terror. Less understandable, given the attention paid to immigration, climate change, and sexism, is that Americans think made-up news is a greater concern than all of them. Sadly, they may be right. The frequent inability to know what is true and what's not is an existential threat to an open society that values free speech. We can't even trust what we see, as sophisticated deep fake videos create alternate realities. We'll look into those specifically later this week. According to the recent Pew Research study, only drug addiction and affordability of healthcare are seen as significantly worse problems for the country than what President Trump loves to describe as fake news. As is now often the case, Pew found deep divisions on the issue. Republicans reported encountering fake news much more often than Democrats. That's not surprising because there is plenty of evidence that most major broadcast and print organizations lean left. However, pro-Trump bias among Republicans skews their perspective. They often believe negative stories about Trump are made up even when they're accurate, including those when Trump himself is spreading fake news. Talk about a vicious circle. Even so, Americans blame politicians and activists more than journalists for fake news. They blame foreign actors about the same as the media. But again, there is a big party difference. Only 20% of Democrats blame the media for fabricating news, while almost 3 times as many Republicans do. Blaming traditional media organizations is facile, though. Even if a news source is biased, that doesn't mean it's inventing stories. Sure, legitimate news organizations make mistakes. They are only as good as their sources, reporters, and editors. But they do not deliberately spread disinformation or hoaxes. Still, made-up news, mostly disseminated on the internet, is causing confusion, and major news organizations can't dodge responsibility by blaming social media for all of it. They have to bear some of the blame for creating this environment of doubt. That is especially true of news organizations that used to be serious and that tried to be objective, but which have become increasingly sensationalistic or regularly distort distinctions between what is hard news and what is opinion. The line between reality and what's made up gets blurred when a news outlet heavily slants its coverage. Outlets that try to pass off opinion journalism as objective reporting open the door wide to criticism that they're peddling fake news. One thing Democrats and Republicans agree on is that the media is far more responsible for fixing the problem of made-up news than anyone else, even if journalists didn't generate the false information. No doubt, the media should care and actively be part of the solution. The bottom line, though, is that news consumers will need to educate themselves and be proactive. The Pew data has a bit of a silver lining, finding that most of us are taking action. Most Americans say they are checking facts themselves. Almost 2/3 have changed where they get their news, and a majority have adjusted how they consume social media, in some cases not following people or news organizations they believe post made-up news. On the other hand, the fact that we even need to take action is a dark cloud, and so is the Pew finding that made-up news has changed the way we deal with each other. Half of Americans say they avoid talking with some friends and coworkers because they might bring up made-up news into the conversation. It's a sad sign of the times.